What's going on, everybody? Anthony Servino here, Face Off Sports Network, with my top starts and sits at the tight end position for fantasy football week 3. Let's get right into it with Kyle Pitts. And Kyle Pitts has been quiet through 2 weeks. Now, week 1 did find the end zone, 11.6 PPR points, but only 3 of 3 targets for 26 yards and the aforementioned touchdown this past week against Philly. 4 targets, another 3 receptions, 20 yards. But let's face it, this Atlanta Falcons offense has yet to begin to click. It was a week 1 tough matchup against Pittsburgh. It opened up a little bit against Philly. Kirk Cousins looked a little bit more comfortable, but I believe this week is a terrific chance for Kyle Pitts. He gets the Kansas City Chiefs, who are the number 1 team against fantasy tight ends. They have been gashed for 25 receptions, 276 yards, and a touchdown through 2 games. Obviously, a lot of that damage came in week 1, but not so fast. Remember last week, Mike Gesicki, 7 for 91. Eric All, 4 for 32. Drew Sample, 3 for 28. This KC secondary, now it's good defense, but this secondary is extremely vulnerable to enemy tight ends. Kyle Pitts, he's on the field, obviously dominating tight end snaps. This is no longer the Arthur Smith era where we're seeing guys like Jonnu Smith get on the field. Kyle Pitts, at least 23 routes run in the past 2 games, playing at least 42 snaps. This is Kyle Pitts' position, and getting the Chiefs this week. This may not only be a big time game, this could be a career game for Kyle Pitts. I don't think that's a hot take at all. Let's go to my next start at the tight end position. That is Luke Schoonmaker of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I want to put this out there. If Jake Ferguson plays, because there's a chance that he returns to game action this week, then Jake Ferguson obviously slides into Schoonmaker's place and is a must start. But in the event that Schoonmaker starts and Ferguson misses another game, which is within the range of outcomes, I'm absolutely positively smashing Schoonmaker in my starting lineup. Here is why. Now, last week against the Saints, it was another effort with Dak Prescott throwing to his tight ends. We can go back to guys like Witten, Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz, Ferguson, and now Schoonmaker. Whoever that starting tight end is, Dak Prescott will lean on them, and it was no different last week. Schoonmaker, 6 targets, 6 receptions, 43 yards, 10.3 PPR points. Played 28 offensive snaps where Spanford, he did get on the field 21 snaps, but Schoonmaker, former second-round pick, has the skill set to be a terrific pass catcher in this offense when his number is called. And obviously, Ferguson, he's currently listed as questionable with the MCL injury. He was limited for Wednesday's practice. I would say he's 50-50 to play. And obviously, if Ferguson's active, we are going to absolutely roll him in our fantasy lineups because we know what this guy does. He is Dak Prescott's safety blanket. Even going back to week 1, he had 5 targets before leaving the game due to the injury, caught 3 for 15 against a tough Cleveland matchup. But this is the coming out party for the Cowboys tight end position. The Ravens, they are not great against enemy tight ends. They have given up the 3rd most production to the position, 16 receptions, 180 yards through 2 games, have yet to give up a touchdown. That potentially changes this week. Let's go to my 3rd start. That's George Kittle. And the 49ers, they are beginning to get a little bit banged up, right? Especially on offense. CMC, he's unavailable. Debo, he's unavailable. Guys like George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk, the big money guys, they're going to have to step up. And last week, we had that step up in the loss to Minnesota, where George Kittle, 20.6 PPR points, 7 of 8 targets for 76 yards and a touchdown. Now George Kittle gets the Los Angeles Rams. And this is an outstanding spot for George Kittle. We know the Rams are not a great defense right now. They have struggled mightily through the first 2 games of the year. George Kittle historically plays really well against the Rams. At 13 career games, 59 receptions, 826 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Now, last time these two teams met up, George Kittle didn't really do much in the game that he was active, but some of his other games, he's put up some solid numbers, scoring touchdowns. So we need George Kittle in our starting lineups in fantasy. The 49ers need George Kittle to step up in real life, because the 49ers, they can't afford to start dropping games without their best players. That puts extra pressure on Brock Purdy. That puts extra pressure on this team overall. And let's face it, I may be in the minority here. I think the Arizona Cardinals, this offense is for real. And if the defense under Gannon starts improving, they could be challenging a team like the 49ers for this division when it's all said and done. Now let's pivot to some of the sits. We're going to start with Dalton Kincaid. And I was all in on Kincaid coming in, but he has not been living up to form. Week 1, invisible. 1 of 2 targets for 11 yards. That game was kind of out of reach because that was another showing of Josh Allen taking over. Last week against Miami, Kincaid got started early. 4 targets for 33 yards. Then he suffers what looked to be a potential head injury, I believe. Exits the game. Now, he did come back. But at that point, if we remember, by halftime, that game was blown away. Buffalo did not have to throw the football. And we saw a lot more Dawson Knox, who outsnapped Kincaid 24-19. It wasn't just because of the injury. The game was so far put away. You didn't have to throw the football, a lot of running. And we know Knox is a superior run-blocking tight end. Until I see Kincaid get going, and he can and he will, I can't trust him, especially in a matchup against Jacksonville. Why Jacksonville? They're one of the toughest matchups for enemy tight ends. In fact, Jacksonville, the 4th fewest fantasy points allowed to the position. Jacksonville has only given up 3 receptions for 23 yards total through 2 games. I get it. They got Jordan Akins, not Njoku in week 2. They got Jonnu Smith and Miami. Don't really feature the tight ends anyway. And Kincaid's good and all, but I need to see it first. Jacksonville, you can gash them throwing the football in the slot to the perimeter receivers. Usually, if those are getting attacked, sometimes the tight end position gets a little bit overlooked. So I'm going to fade Dalton Knox this week. Let's go to another sit. And I hate to say it, Mike Gesicki, who I was all in on Mike Gesicki this offseason. I thought he would fill in that big slot role. And the slot role overall for Cincinnati when Tyler Boyd left. And so far, so good. However, I'm a little bit worried about Gesicki. Now, if you're in a bind, I can see why you would start Gesicki. Washington is not a good football team. They can't defend the pass, but this is another team. You can throw all over them, targeting your wide receivers, and maybe there's not enough meat on the bone for a guy like Mike Gesicki. Gesicki, week 1, on paper, it didn't look good. 4.8 PPR points, but a touchdown was called back. Obviously, last week, absolutely goes ballistic. 7 of 9 for 91 yards, 16.1 in PPR. Washington is actually number 1 in terms of fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. But again, is that real or is that make-believe? And why I say that, they've been so poor against wide receivers, you really have to use the tight end. Last week against the New York Giants, I'm not even as sure a tight end was targeted. And then week 1 against Tampa, where those receivers ran wild, Cade Otton only 1 reception for 5 yards. Gesicki is a larger piece for the Cincinnati offense and for Joe Burrow, as is the tight end position is as a whole. And if T. Higgins sits, then I might say, screw it. I think you put Gesicki in there if T. Higgins sits. But if T. Higgins makes his debut, I think there's a world where we see Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both. They can both go for 80 yards and a touchdown, those wide receivers. So I'm a little bit worried about Gesicki, but he should not be cut. He should be on all fantasy football rosters moving forward. Let's go to my final sit. That's Cole Kmet. We know why we're sitting Cole Kmet. I kind of like the Bears offense this week to finally get going. 2 tough matchups to open the year against Tennessee and Houston. Indy's not that good defensively. You can certainly throw and run on them, but they've been good. They're 12th in terms of fantasy points allowed to the tight end. Like, they don't give up a lot to this position. And Cole Kmet, what do we know about Cole Kmet? While he is leading Gerald Everett in snaps 75-58, there's a world where Gerald Everett can always take over. Why do I say that? Well, week 1, Kmet 25 snaps, Everett 33. Last week, Kmet actually doubled Gerald Everett in snaps. What are we going to get this week? I don't think anybody knows. And I think we need to see a little bit more of the Chicago offense develop. I need to see which tight end is going to pop more, because obviously Everett has a rapport with Shane Waldron, but Kmet is a superior talent. And last week, Kmet did get 5 targets, caught 4 for 27. Obviously not much in fantasy, under 10 PPR points. But I'm going to still sit Cole Kmet until I see his true involvement in this offense. And I think this week, when we see the snap share distribution between the 2 tight ends, if we see Cole Kmet get another 5 targets, then maybe we can feel comfortable starting him in matchups against the Rams and Carolina, who he faces in weeks 4 and weeks 5. They are very easy matchups for tight ends. But this week, let's give it one more week. And if you have Kmet, you're probably not starting him. And if you are starting him, you could be 0-2. So we're sitting Cole Kmet one more time, and let's see if this Bears offense can actually wake up and do something. That's going to do it for today. I'm Anthony Servino. If you like content like this, hit the subscribe button, hit the alert icon, so you can be notified anytime we go live to answer your questions or drop videos just like this. Good luck in NFL Week 3. And remember, if you have any questions, any comments, you don't like my takes, you don't like my hair, let me know in the comment section of this video. We'll see you later.